This is your Friday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. As usual, a lot to get to today. Randy Johnson will join me in just a little bit from Pittsburgh. He is out there covering the Frozen Four, the men's Frozen Four. Lots of drama in that Thursday night. St. Cloud and UMass winning. Minnesota-Duluth loses in overtime. Minnesota State falls victim to St. Cloud State's comeback after their comeback of their own. So it'll be a St. Cloud State UMass final on Saturday. Randy will get into that quite a bit in just a little longer here. But first, what did I miss? Let's start with the Twins home opener, should we? Because I've got a lot I want to get to in a little bit, including a trade of a wild trade I'd like to see happen, even though it probably won't happen. I want to get to the Twins right off the bat, though, because home opener kind of felt like one of those games where everything fell into place, right? And it kind of has for them, by and large, this season. They're 5-2 now. In my expanded standings, I guess is how you'd put it. The way I like to see the standings done this year, based on the weird extra innings rule still in effect. They're 5-0-2 since they've yet to lose yet here in regulation. Only lost those 2 games where they put the runner on second. That's not the point here today, though. The point is 10-2 over Seattle in the opener. Jose Barrios pitches well, gets a standing ovation from the roughly 10,000 fans as he walks off the field. Love to see that. Byron Buxton keeps doing what he does. We're going to hear from Roy Smalley here in a little bit, a few opinions of Roy and why Byron is able to put it together this year. Buxton has another long home run and a double. So the offense was clicking. Mitch Garver, 3-run homer. Luis Arias goes deep, uses Nelson Cruz, gives him all the power. Nelson Cruz legs out another infield hit. Love to see that. So just everything seems like it was clicking for them in that game. Again, not drawing too many conclusions, but you can see the makings of a pretty good team here, right? A team where, kind of like Phil Miller and I talked about the other day, you don't necessarily have one exceptional thing. The offense, I think, was exceptional on Thursday. They got some good defensive plays. They got good starting pitching. A team, though, that does almost everything well, and therefore will have a game like this where they just flat out, crush a team when everything clicks, or, they can have a game kind of like the one they had on Wednesday where, the offense wasn't that great, but they got enough timely hitting. The starting pitching was pretty good, but, they needed Maeda to work out of some jams. The defense had to bail them out a little bit there, and the bullpen was really good. So if you have more than one thing that you do well, if you do almost everything well, if more of those than not click in a given day, you're probably still going to win. You're going to win. You're going to be in a game at least, and I think that's kind of how the Twins are built this year. But, sometimes, like I said, they're going to put it all together, and, they're just going to crush an opponent, and they did that on Thursday, got that game in, short little rain delay. Now they get an off day Friday where it looks like it's going to rain here today, so kind of the weather smiling on them, at least to a certain degree, to be able to get that game in, to play really well, have the fans in the stands. And that was a big deal. Just even the ovation, like I referenced, of, Barrios coming off the mound. Just something like that where we hadn't had that for a long time. And it's just, just to see that happen, it was kind of cool. It was a weird thing that I was just kind of like, oh man, I missed that. Like that happens like 162, maybe not 162, for 81 target field home games, that happens quite a bit, at least in the course of a regular season, where the starting pitcher gets an ovation when he gets lifted, especially in the middle of a game. So, he pitches almost 6 innings, effective innings, and then gets taken out, and he gets that nice ovation, and you're just like, okay, this is the difference. This is the difference. This is what we were missing last season, and hopefully we start to see even more fans in the stands as the vaccine rollout continues on and people continue to get it, and it becomes safer and safer and safer to go to a baseball game. But I don't think they could have scripted it much better than it went on Thursday, to be able to play that game, to be able to have it the outcome it was. And now the Twins, 5-0-2. I'm going to keep the standings up as long as we can this season because I think it's funny, and I think it's also relevant because I don't like the way these extra innings are run. Before that game, I hosted a roundtable discussion with Megan Ryan, our new Twins beat writer, Lavelle E. Neal III, columnist who covered the Twins for a long time, and Roy Smalley from Bally Sports North. And you can find that. There's a link to the replay of that. You have to register to watch it, but there's a link to that you can find. To promote that, I want to play a little clip of a question I asked Roy Smalley during that about Buxton and just kind of, how a player can figure something out. Because, Roy Smalley played the game. His power didn't really emerge until a few years into his career. Not the same kind of player as Byron Buxton, obviously, but a very good major league player in his own right and someone who knows hitting very well. So here was Roy Smalley talking about how Byron Buxton is able to put everything together so far this season. As someone who played the game, such as yourself, and maybe it took you a few years to put it all together yourself, what's that process like, and what are you seeing from Byron Buxton so far this season?
It's interesting. Generally speaking, for most young guys, young players, when they come in, it takes 1,200 at-bats to, 1,500 at-bats, something like that, before they figure out who they are, before they figure out what their mechanics needs to be, their hitting mechanics, but also how you figure out what pitchers are trying to do to you, what pitches you hit best, how to lay off stuff you don't hit well. I mean, it takes some time for almost everybody. There are some exceptions. Mike Trout didn't seem to need 1,200 at-bats. He needed about 12. But for most guys, it takes about that long. And that's about where Byron is now. He's got a world of talent. He's got tremendous bat speed naturally, as quick as nearly anybody's, and he's made himself stronger this year over the winter. I think the last piece of it is just mentally now feeling confident in what he's doing, and it seems that he is that way too. I think right now, and all of us hitters, love these streaks when you think that there's nobody's got anything that can get you out, and that's kind of the way Byron feels right now. But I don't think you can overstate how important it is. When I was thinking about, as I've been thinking about the first 6 games of the season, the real encouragement, the two most significant things has been the fact that Nelson Cruz at 41 years old has broken from the gate, swinging the bat really well, and Byron Buxton, this could become Byron's team just about any time. Looks like he may be willing to ascend to that role. So that's pretty encouraging.
Well, I've heard the 1,200 to 1,500 number mentioned before. What is it about that? As someone who, probably needed something like that yourself when you were playing, your power kind of started to emerge a few years into your career. Is it pitch recognition? Is it familiarity? Is it confidence? Is it a mix of all those things?
It's a mix of all of those things. You really don't know for sure what your hitting mechanics should be, what you should be trying to do mechanically at the big league level for a while, because it's so much different than the minor leagues. In the minor leagues, from AA and AAA, you've got guys that can have big league stuff, but they're not around the plate all the time. It's 3-ball-3 a lot of the times, and you just never develop a real rhythm about how what your mechanics are going to be like. So guys might have big league stuff in the minor leagues, but not enough of them, and you can do well just on sheer talent until you get to the big leagues. Once you get to the big leagues, it has to be talent, but also the other things that you mentioned. It's got to be refining your mechanics so you can do it repeatedly, day in, day out. It's pitch recognition. It's understanding what pitchers have, what kind of stuff, what their best thing is, what your best attribute is, how they're going to try to get after you. There's just a lot of stuff. Plus, every day you're seeing a big league pitcher, and there's no time to get 3 or 4 hits against somebody in the minor leagues that that's never going to be to the big leagues. These guys come at you every day, and you get to learn psychologically about playing under the pressure of trying to perform and trying to figure it all out all at the same time.
Good stuff from Roy. Does a great job on Bally Sports North. You can find that whole discussion we had with Roy and Megan and Lavelle on StarTribune.com. Before I get to Randy Johnson, an interesting Wolves stat caught my eye the other day on Twitter, tweeted out by Todd Whitehead at Crumpled Jumper. It was ostensibly about the Nets and how many lineups they've used this season. So basically, it was a chart of the number of lineup combinations teams have used this year, and you can find all this information really on Basketball Reference. But the way they visualized it really brought it home for just how good teams really tend to have some continuity at the very least, and bad teams don't. And Utah, which has been the story of the league this year, the lineup that has played the most minutes has been on the court for 22% of all their possessions. Number 2 is Phoenix. They have 23. Actually, Phoenix is number 1. I think this goes in order of record right now. Phoenix, 23% of all possessions have been played by the 5-man group that has played the most minutes. So you start to think about continuity. Their most used lineup has played 23% of all possessions in Phoenix, 22% in Utah, and it shows on the court, right? They have really good records. They've been two of maybe the more surprising teams in the league, and then it extends out. Utah, 85% of all their possessions have been played by their top 20 lineups. So 5-man combinations. It shows that they probably haven't had a ton of injuries, but they've also settled in on rotations. They know who they're playing. Guys have gotten comfortable playing with each other. They know each other's tendencies. You kind of go through the list. Wolves down here at the bottom. Bottom for record and also bottom for continuity. Their most used lineup has played only 4% of the possessions this year. You're talking about Phoenix and Utah over 20%. Wolves, 4% of their possessions have been played by their most used lineup this season, and only 38% of their top 20 lineup. The top 20 most used lineups have only played 38% of all possessions. So they're just like a hodgepodge of all these different lineup combinations, and we've seen it on the court, and we know what the impact is, right? There's been very little continuity this season for them. They're young to begin with, so not by way of excuse, but by way of explanation. When you have a lot of injuries, when you don't exactly have an identity, when you change a coach in the middle of the season too, and that coach wants to see different things play out, you are going to naturally struggle. It doesn't automatically mean you're going to struggle. The Nets have used a lot of different combinations. They've only had their most used lineup on the court 8% of the time. Only had their top 20 lineups out there 37% of the time. So if you have really, really talented players, it's possible to get away with it. But most teams who are in the top of the standings also are near the top in that continuity, and those who are near the bottom are the opposite way. And the Timberwolves are in that boat where they're trying to figure out what combinations work and have played through a lot of injuries. So just a different way to think about their struggle this season, and an interesting way to think about it. I retweeted it on Thursday if you want to take a look at it. It's probably the easiest way to find it. But so look at Ramball. I just thought it was an interesting stat that shows you a little bit more of how they've struggled this season.
I'm Nyla Jean Myers, Senior Assistant Sports Editor at the Star Tribune. Thank you for listening to Strip Sports Daily Delivery. This work is made possible by our Star Tribune subscribers. For unlimited access to the articles mentioned in this podcast and our coverage of Minnesota sports from pros to preps, go to startribune.com/subscribe.
Happy to have Randy Johnson on right now. Randy's out in Pittsburgh covering the Frozen Four. We had 4 teams that started the day Thursday, Randy, down to 2, and we lost a couple of Minnesota teams because St. Cloud knocks off Mankato, Minnesota State, and then UMass, playing shorthanded, is able to top Minnesota-Duluth in overtime. A couple of really good games. Maybe first off, just kind of walk me through what happened and your impression of everything that happened on Thursday.
Oh, wow. It was quite the eventful day. We'll start off with St. Cloud State beating Minnesota State Mankato 5-4. Very, very entertaining game. Back and forth. Third period looks like Mankato's gonna go and get into the final, and then St. Cloud comes storming back and gets the winning goal in the final minute on a marvelous tip in by Nolan Walker on a shot from the point. You look at that thing on the replay, it just gets a stick on it and it sneaks in just above Dryden McKay and on the upper corner. Very, very, very good play. And it's you have to feel for Minnesota State. I mean, all they've gone through and this nice run they've had over the last 4 or 5 years under Coach Mike Hastings. But St. Cloud State just keeps coming on. They're playing without their one of their best players in Easton Brodzinski, who had suffered a broken leg in the regional final, and they just keep finding ways to win.
Those are 2 teams too that obviously both Minnesota teams, and both of them have had their share of heartbreak in the NCAA tournament. So one of them was obviously going to lose, but St. Cloud's got to be euphoric right now to be in the final and to be one game away from having a championship.
Yeah, what was pretty interesting, they were very happy they won, but still businesslike. Brett Larson has that team dialed in. They're here to win. That's it. They're not messing around.
The second game goes to overtime. Seems like it's kind of a tale of kind of almost two games in one, where Minnesota-Duluth controlled a lot of the play in regulation. But they can't decide a winner. Minnesota-Duluth, as often happens, goes to overtime with when it gets to the postseason. That's kind of been their MO. But no magic this time. UMass is able to escape with that win and really controlled play a lot of that overtime, right?
Yeah, it was interesting because Minnesota-Duluth is a team that they usually have no trouble playing tight games. Though they're this tournament, the NCAA tournament run they've had, basically they've played 6 one-goal games out of 9 in their 9-game NCAA winning streak that came to the end last night. They get a lead, they lock it down and move on. And I was assuming it was going to be that way last night too. After they go into the third period with a lead, playing pretty well through a good chunk of the third period. Then momentum starts to shift. UMass gets the goal, and then overtime, Minnesota-Duluth just did not have anything to tank. They were just exhausted. You could really tell the ice was tilted in UMass's favor. Shots on goal ended up 13-2 in the overtime, and it after a while there, it just seemed like it was a matter of time until they pop one in. Tanner Latterud of the Bulldogs had a breakaway where, say, if he got hauled down, it was questionable, but I don't think the refs were gonna call anything at that point. It was interesting at the end of regulation, they called the last 2 minutes. They called one penalty on each team, which they had swallowed their whistles for most of the night. So
yeah, that's interesting. So disappointment, but I mean, obviously they've got two. They were the 2-time defending champs. They make it to a Frozen Four again this year, where maybe that wasn't the huge expectation. So still a really good run for both Minnesota-Duluth and Minnesota State, when you consider where the season started, where were we sure they were even going to get this season in, and to have a three Minnesota teams in the Frozen Four was an accomplishment in and of itself.
Yeah, it was very, very good. I mean, those teams that didn't advance yesterday, there's no shame there. I mean, they both played very good games. It just, Duluth just ran out of gas at the end. They were going for some very interesting historic milestones. Had they won, that would have been the first time a team has ever been in 4 consecutive national championship games.
Wow.
Had they won, they would have been going for 3 in a row, which would have been the first time since Michigan won 3. Michigan's been in 1951 through 53 is the only team to win 3 in a row.
Wow.
It's kind of interesting afterward. Coach Scott Sandel was saying, this is all this team knows, being in the Frozen Four. I'm sure it's all of a sudden, oh, okay, the season's done now.
Yeah, kind of that aspect of it too. You're right. Well, for 2 teams, it's not done. After watching, St. Cloud and UMass in their separate games Thursday, how do you kind of assess what kind of game we're going to see on Saturday?
Well, St. Cloud, coached by Brett Larson, who's Scott Sandlin protege, you're going to see a Minnesota-Duluth-like game. It's kind of interesting. Mike Hastings, the Minnesota State coach, was saying that you watch St. Cloud, it's just like you're switching a maroon jersey for a black one. They play so much like Duluth. I think you're going to see that type of approach. They're a relentless team. They keep pressing. They keep going forward. They're nation's forecheck. I think it's going to be a very good game. UMass obviously showed a lot of resilience last night. They were playing without their usual starting goalie, Philip Lindbergh, and their lead goal scorer, and Carson Gieswitz. And it sounds like those two have a chance to play. Late last night, there was a release from UMass that those guys in their backup goalie, or third string goal, excuse me, will be coming to Pittsburgh. They have to go through more testing protocols for COVID, but there is a chance they'll be available on Saturday.
That's interesting. It's it's a whole new piece of this, because obviously you're right. Those guys missed out with COVID protocols, but yeah, being able to withstand that and still get through and win win their semifinal game. What was stylistically, how does UMass play? That's a team that, out of the four here, we were the least familiar with, obviously.
Yeah, they have depth. That's what they really showed last night. I think they wore down Minnesota-Duluth with their depth in overtime. They'll roll four lines. They're opportunistic too. That's the thing that they showed last night. Getting that third period goal to tie it. I don't think that many people in the arena, except some UMass fans, thought that was going to happen. The way Duluth locks things down. So St. Cloud State will be facing a team that's their coach is all business. Greg Carvel for UMass. He came here to win.
Last thing for you, atmosphere-wise, out in Pittsburgh, did you sense a good Minnesota contingency based on how many, 75% of the teams being from Minnesota?
Yeah, I mean, it was good considering
right.
The limitations on the 25% attendance figure. But yeah, all three teams, their fans made their presence known during the game. It was, the atmosphere. Yeah, it's not like a full arena, but they did as much as they could. There are still obviously times where you don't hear the murmur of a crowd as much, but you hear the outburst when something goes well, and if there's a call that they didn't agree with, that's for sure.
No, we never hear calls we don't like in hockey, Randy. Come on.
No, not
hockey
at all.
Fans are very polite. They just sit on those hands. All right, well, good stuff. Read Randy's stuff, Star Tribune and StarTribune.com. Good coverage of both of those games on Thursday night, and that are now in Friday's paper and on StarTribune.com. I'm sure there'll be plenty of advance work for Saturday's paper as well, and then coverage of that championship game on Saturday night. Randy, good stuff. Thanks for joining Daily Delivery and hitting that early morning alarm button.
Yeah, it was an early one, but late night. But hey, no, thanks for having me on, Mike. This is a fun time.
All right, take care, Randy.
See ya.
Good stuff from Randy. We will see if St. Cloud State can finish this off on Saturday. Would be a pretty cool story for the Huskies, for sure. When you hear that sound, of course, it's because I feel like a trade machine. And a lot of times when I do this on the podcast, it's because there's a trade that I've kind of got cooked up, whether it was, a month or two ago with Kirk Cousins, whether it was a Wolves deal before the trade deadline. This one's more of philosophical. And the NHL trade deadline is coming up on Monday. I don't know what the Wild are going to do. The biggest need obviously still is, frontline center. Those things are hard to come by. You don't want to just, mortgage the future because you're having a better than expected season this year. So you don't want to just go all in on a rental. I don't know if this is the team to go all in on a rental on. I think they're a good team. Like I said on Thursday, I think this is a team that showed, particularly in that Wednesday win against Colorado, particularly by winning with 4 power play goals, that they could, compete in the playoffs, even beyond the first round, even if they had to see Colorado again in that second round. But I don't know if this is the team to go all in on. But I'm a little curious here about the Zach Parise situation, because there's just been hints along the way that this isn't working out. They almost traded him at the deadline last year. If you don't remember that, almost got traded to the Islanders, didn't happen, fell through. Ever since then, Dean Everson gets the permanent job. Zach Parise's playing pretty heavy minutes to start this season, kind of in line with his normal, kind of his new career normal. If you look at his game logs on Hockey Reference, start of the season, he's usually playing, anywhere from 17 to 21 minutes, kind of right in line with where he had been. Then right in the middle of the season, he kind of hits a dip where all of a sudden now he's playing about 14, 15 minutes. He had a little, there's the COVID pause that he had, everybody had to go through it, and he had a COVID pause recently too. But even before the COVID pause, if you just look at his last 7 games, almost all of them have been in the 11, 12-minute range. He's had a couple of them at 10:56. Those are barring injury games where I went and looked back at his whole Wild career. Those barring games where he had to leave early in the game with an injury, those are the lowest minute totals of his Wild career. So he had the the game this year where he was a healthy scratch. He had the game where he was benched for part of the third period, just a coach's decision because maybe they didn't like where his game was at. He's frustrated. He said that the other day. He's frustrated with his role and trying to adapt to this new role of, not getting as much ice time, not getting power play time. And I'm sure it's tough, because listen, Zach Parise, everybody loved the emergence of Kevin Fiala last season. Zach Parise led the team in goals last year with 25. The year before that, Zach Parise led the team in goals with 28. Like, this is a guy who has been productive even on the back half of his career and the back half of this contract, even as younger players have emerged. Now, this year, for whatever reason, not clicking, wasn't working out. His role's been diminished. He's not really in that scoring role anymore. It's more of a role of, defensive a little bit, take up space, neutralize the other team. Not so much a checking forward. He still has an offensive game to him, but he's not getting the power play time. So here's the thing. His contract makes him very hard to trade, and his role makes him very hard to trade. I just wonder if both sides would be better off if this was resolved in some way where he was dealt before the deadline on Monday. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm not saying they even should do that because a player like Zach Parise could be valuable again as the season goes along and once the playoffs get here. I'm just saying that I don't like where this is at right now, and if there was a way that you could do a change of scenery kind of trade where he would waive his no trade clause and get that get something to shake loose here. I know he's got the contract. I know that would be hard. You'd have to take money back from a different team and probably another contract that's long. I'm just saying a change of scenery feels like it might be in order based on the whole way this season has played out, and maybe, just maybe, they could figure something out before Monday. Let's end with the cooler. Our Marcus Fuller reporting the other day that Richard Pitino, $0 buyout. That has been confirmed per the terms of his contract. I want to go back to Mark Coyle here, athletic director, and what a job he did on this, because the way I imagine this played out, Richard Pitino should have been, would have been in line for a buyout. I know that when he took another job, and I'm sure he was incentivized to want to have another job. He's a young coach. You don't want to just sit there and not do anything. But here's the way I imagine this played out. Richard Pitino sitting there saying, okay, I don't think they want me anymore. Mark Coyle has made that clear to me. Mark Coyle's like, well, here's the thing. I don't want to fire you any more than you want to have on your resume that you were fired. Why don't we find a way? Why don't you start looking for another job? When we make this separation, we won't say fired. We'll say, parted ways, and you'll take this New Mexico job that you've got lined up, and we won't have to pay a buyout. You won't have to pay a clause that you left, and we'll just kind of let it go like that. And, so I don't. This happens a lot, where a coach just kind of switches jobs. But, if we're being honest, the New Mexico job is not a promotion, right? This is not a job where you say, I want to go do this regardless of what's happening here. He takes a pretty big pay cut to go from Minnesota to New Mexico, probably more than half of what he was making, reduction in more than half of what he was making here. So just an all-time finesse, I guess, is what I would say by Mark Coyle, to be able to craft that situation so you don't have to pay a buyout, to make it work, where you're able to bring in a new coach and kind of have it be clean, or at least clean seeming, and bring in Ben Johnson to be able to have that happen. So all-timer there, and I'm glad we finally have the details of that. That'll do it today. Thanks for joining me on the show all week. Have some good stuff coming up next week. Monday should be a fun one. Lots of good stuff this weekend. Write a review, please. Leave a rating. Write a review on the Apple Podcast, things like that. Subscribe to StarTribune.com, and we will see you on Monday.